Hello everybody, how's it going today? Glowplasma231 here, back in day talk about Tenmaku Cinema, chapter number 1. This chapter is titled Scene 1, The First Movie. And that is a sentence that feels incredibly weird to say. I mean, it's a sentence that I haven't said in what I posted last Tenmaku Cinema video on September 11th of 2023. Okay, bad timing on posting that video, but besides for that fact, it has been, I'm recording this in the beginning of May of 2025, so if we do the math, like, alright, September is the 9th month, May is the 5th month, that's 4 months there. Yeah, it's been like 16 months since I last said those words of like, hey, I'm going to talk about Tenmaku Cinema today. And really the reason I'm making this video is because, of course, as I've alluded to, back in the day, I, of course, did talk about Tenmaku Cinema here on this good old YouTube channel. Of course, back then, it was still called Glowplasma231, and I didn't have the new icon I have now. But, hey, we've been moving up in the world, if you know what I'm saying, right? We got a brand new icon. Granted, I say brand new. I've had it for, like, 2 years at this point. Not even 2 years, more like a year, and I'm finally putting it into use now. Few months later, if you guys know what I'm sort of saying, right? But of course, back in the day, I talked about Tenmaku Cinema, but I only started talking about Tenmaku Cinema on chapter number 3, which means that, like, hey, I completed most of the series. I mean, chapter number 3 to 21, I mean, I got like 21st out of this manga, but of course, I never talked about the first and second chapters of the manga, and I'm also going on a quest to go back through and sort of re-update all of my old thumbnails that I made, being that a lot of them are really poor and bad, and I feel like even if I just use, like, the same manga images, I could just do them, like, you know, a little bit better. And in that process, I'm like, hey, while I'm doing this, let me also just go through, I mean, I need to update all the Tenmaku Cinema thumbnails, so I'm like, hey, let me go through and also just make videos on the first and second chapter of Tenmaku Cinema, just to be like, hey, if you guys want to hear my thoughts on Tenmaku Cinema, you start here at this first video, be like, oh, I like this review, go to the second one, oh, this is good review stuff, and then go listen to a video that is literally now about 2 years old at the time of recording this video. Yeah, the first video I published was on May 3rd of 2023. It is currently May 7th of 2025. That video is 2 years old, which is absolutely insane to think about, right? But either way, going through all of this, I'm just excited to talk about Tenmaku Cinema, and I see no reason, then why shouldn't we just go on and hop right on into it, right? So, of course, we start off this manga with, of course, our color pages. As we see our lead main character, pretty much, we know his name is Hajime Shinichi. We will learn all of that later, but I'm just telling you what his name is currently, and we pretty much see that he's just going through and watching a movie in a theater. And as he's sort of going through and seeing all this, we see this weird ghost guy, who of course we know is Tenmaku, is coming through and just going like, now, who will it be? Will it be you? You? Maybe you? Oh no, I've decided. I choose you. As he just says like, hey, I need to borrow this arm, as he pretty much floats up in front of Hajime Shinichi, picks up his arm and pretty much holds it up to the sky, and like, we see that Hajime sees Tenmaku in front of him here for this first time in color. It's a pretty cool colored for its spread. I really do like it, you know? But pretty much the beginning of this movie, or I say the beginning of this movie, man, my mind is already being corrupted, right? But we see the, like, true start of this manga is Hajime Shinichi sitting in the movie research club room, which is also just known as the audiovisual room, as we see that he's just watching a movie. It looks like a romance movie or some kind of movie like that, which is currently set in Paris, being that we see the Eiffel Tower in the background. And we pretty much just like see, oh, some music is playing out of the screen, and we see that Hajime is just sitting there in front of it, watching these two people hold hands in front of the Eiffel Tower. And we see that he's just like, all right. So some of the protagonist acting was weak, so that's definitely minus 2 points. Also, the director really likes this type of story development, minus like 0.2 points. And then if we also think about like, hey, some of the dialogue was a bit long, minus 1.5 points. Let's see what we tie up with all the rest of that. Man, that's plus 80 million points, pretty much. Not even 80 million, 800 million. Like, he just sees all of this, and we just see, like, all of this various stuff of, like, a massaging use of the Kushlove effect, plus 50 million points, and we just understand that our main character here really loves movies. As we see one of the other resident members of the movie club, of course, being that I've read this manga before, I know his name is Akitsu. What is his full name? Let me quickly go. I had the wiki pulled up for this. Yes, there is a Tenmaku Cinema wiki. It didn't get too much junction of it, but it still sort of got all the way through there, right? His name is Junosuke Akitsu. But we see that he's pretty much standing there right next to I almost said Tenmaku, to Hajime, and just says like, hey, isn't that like a little kind of extreme, if you know what I'm saying, right? And Hajime is like, no, there's no other way. It's just pure value, right? As we just understand a little bit about Hajime, he just says like, hey, my name is Hajime Shinichi, and I was extremely sickly when I was really little, and basically all I saw of the world was the view from my sick bed or desk, pretty much, right? Like, hey, the only way I could ever see vivid sights I'd never experienced was through movies. As we also see the other members of the movie club in there, of course, the other members are, as we all remember, Ai, Shino, and Ryoji Bito, right? Of course, I'll be referring to all of them as Akitsu, Shino, and Bito, right? But we pretty much see all of the other ones are staying back there as Hajime's just like, oh, look at that, like, I've gotten 100 on loads of tests tons of times, and a movie is worth so much more than that. It's only natural that they all add up bit by bit, right? As we see that Bito's like, I mean, he is right, it was a very good movie. Shino just says like, yeah, it was really moving, I even cried while watching it, and Akitsu just is like, hey, I mean, the movies that Hajime chooses are like almost always excellent movies, right? As Hajime just says like, hey, oh, and by the way, the way they handled the opening scene was also just so very cool. And he's like, I should add him about 5 million points for that. His friends sort of like make fun of him like, bro, just keep adding your points, all right there. And he's just like, hey, what kind of attitude is that? You call yourself a member of the movie research club? Like, where's your love of all of these various movies, right? As pretty much the other friends are just like, hey, we like movies like normal people, and like, we're just here because you told us to come, Hajime, and all of that stuff. And he's just like, you know what? Damn you all, right? As Akitsu then just says like, hey, Hajime, if you like movies so much, then why don't you make your own? As we see that he sort of goes over to light switch and finally turns the lights on in the audio-visual room, being that like, hey, yes, they're watching a movie, they've been off this entire time. As Hajime pretty much just says like, hey, how dare you take movies so lightly, right? And Akitsu's like, oh god, what did I do? Here comes the rant and lecture, like, oh no, what did I do? Right? But Hajime just says like, hey, movies are the manifestation of wit and intellect, the fruits of the passions of all the clients. They're not just something any amateur can achieve, right? And Akitsu just like, hey, I mean, what are you talking about? Like, there are plenty of people out there who make their own movies as a hobby, right? And he just says like, hey, are you saying that you have no interest in making movies? And Hajime just says like, hey, here's the thing, I've got my hands full just watching them. Plus, I have, like, high school entrance exams. He's like, hey, also, like, we need to take a look at the time. Lunch is almost over. It's time to get back to class, right? As we also see the Akitsu sort of looks over, and he pretty much, like, picks up a notebook that is sitting on one of the tables in there, right? And Akitsu just is like, hey, aren't you going to, like, record the movie score? Or, like, aren't you so diligent about, like, all of your data and stuff like that? And Hajime is just like, oh, crap, I almost forgot. As he sort of, like, goes over to reach for his pencil, which is sort of on his arm, and we sort of see, like, he sort of hesitates. He's like, you know what? I'll remember the score. I'll do it another day. And Akitsu sort of seems, like, a little peeved off by this, like, oh, that's pretty interesting, right? But we then see that Hajime is walking down the halls. We get formally introduced to him as like, hey, Hajime Shinichi, 3rd year in junior high school, 14 years old, a responsible young man with excellent grades. He embodies the model student, presentable in any setting. However, his love of movies is super extreme. He's constantly demanding more funds for the movie research club. He basically made the audio-visual room his own private viewing space, right? As we just see a few scenes of him, like a few of the teachers pretty much going like, hey, Shinichi, how's it going? How's all the exam prep going and all that various stuff, right? And he's just like, oh yeah, it's going just fine. There's still a long way to go. And we also see an image of him pretty much talking with all of the, like, club people, I take it. Like, maybe student council, I don't exactly know what it is. But he's pretty much just saying, like, hey, we all should watch movies. They're good for society, pretty much, right? As we eventually see that Hajime is sort of just, like, going through his daily life and everything, going to class, and he's just thinking, like, hey, well, it's the summer of my 3rd year in junior high school, right? The most critical time for a high school entrance exam prep. Until the exams, the mission is to study efficiently and to save plenty of time for watching movies. I butchered that line. I guess I just can't read all of a sudden, right? But eventually we see that he's in class, pretty much in math class, going through and like trying to take all of his notes on his paper, pretty much, right? As we pretty much see that the teacher calls on him and just says like, hey, Hajime Shinichi, write your answer on the blackboard, please, right? And Hajime's like, can I just, like, answer the question verbally? Like, it's just a number, you know? And the teacher's just like, hey, no, come on, come up here, please. And hey, what's with that attitude, right? And she was like, hey, this is the sort of problem that should be a walk in the park for an exam student like you, pretty much, right? As we see that Hajime goes up with the chalk in his hand, but of course, he's got this weird handprint on his arm, almost like somebody is grabbing him on his forearm, right? And the teacher sort of notices this, and it also looks a little weird whenever Hajime goes on the board to try to write out his math problem, but all that's getting scrawled on is some Japanese writing, is it just says like, hey, I want your arm. Give me your arm. And the teacher's just like, is this the answer that you got? Like, when you're too brilliant, this math question is like not that simple, right? As Hajime's like, hey, I know, like, hey, I'm so sorry about all of this. As we see that, like, he's like scratching his head off one arm, and his other arm that's of course being controlled by Tenmaku, as we know, is like just flailing everywhere in the wind, just like hitting on the desk, just like doing all of these various things. And he's just like, yeah, I'm sorry about all of this, right? And the teacher's like, is everything okay with you? Like, do you need to go to, like, to a doctor or something? And Hajime's like, it's just my body's acting a little weird. And eventually she's like, okay, just go sit down, right? And we see that Hajime sort of, like, walks over very solemnly to his desk, and his friend Akitsu sits beside him and just says, like, Hajime, like, what's going on here, right? As we see that Hajime's arm is, like, still, like, moving out of control, like, slamming onto the desk, and everybody's like, are you okay? And Hajime's, like, yelling at, like, stay still and all of that other stuff, right? And pretty much this sort of, like, goes on that whole idea of, like, the whole 8th grader delusions that they often talk about in, like, manga and anime of, like, this is something that some Japanese kids do to try to seem, like, more cool than they actually are, like, whoa, my arm's being controlled by an anime and manga guy. That's pretty so cool, right? Oh no, I've got a yokai here, right? All of his classmates are pretty much also just being like, did you hear that? Like, he just told his arm to stop moving in class. Like, people like that really exist, right? And even Akitsu comes over, and honestly, a hilarious panel sort of, like, puts his hand on Hajime's shoulder and just says, like, hey, Hajime, we all get it. Did you watch a movie about this kind of thing? Like, was it like an action-adventure version of, like, a shonen manga? Like, hey, man, we all understand it. We just, like, we know junior high kids are like that. So, like, just do your thing. And he's like, but hey, don't you think it's, like, a bit much at the end of the day? And Hajime's just like, hey, I'm not that weird. He's like, hey, I'm just tired from all that exam prep, so my arm's moving at, like, a rapid speed, right? Really just trying to sort of, like, get an excuse for all of this, right? But at this point, we see it's time for Hajime to start walking home from school, as he's like, yeah, okay, I am done. I am tired of studying. Never again, pretty much, right? As he's just on his way home, and he just thinks, like, hey, all of those weird trimmers that I got whenever I pick up a writing implement, like, it's really weird. It's almost like the bizarre vision I had in that movie theater last night. And he's like, hey, I can clearly hear the phantom voice in my head right now, right? As he just hears this, like, demonic screaming, like, give me your arm, I need your arm, listen to me. And Hajime is just like, okay, there is a ghost definitely possessing my arm. I know this. He's like, okay, here's the thing. I didn't hear anything about any of this. Like, I've got to ignore this, or else these weird things are going to take a hold of me. I've got, like, exams to do. Like, I can't be falling into this trap, right? As eventually the ghost screams out from behind him, like, I promise I'll be good. And Hajime pretty much, like, turns around and screams just to the universe and saying, like, hey, quit whining. If you're a ghost, talk like a ghost, right? And Hajime's just like, oh, crap, I just responded to this thing, right? As, of course, then the voice just says, like, oh, finally, you noticed me. As we see the vision of Tenmaku really become a lot more visible to Hajime here in this moment, right? As Tenmaku then, like, gets out of his, like, ghostly demonic speech form, as he just says, like, oh, hey, you finally noticed me. Like, hey, man, no need to be, like, so defensive or anything. Like, hey, allow me to introduce myself first. I am the screenwriter Takehiko Tenmaku. I write scripts for movies, and as you can see, I died, and now I'm just a ghost, right? And Hajime is like, oh, that's interesting, like, you write scripts for movies? That's, like, a bit of a different thing, all things considered. As Tenmaku just says, like, hey, I came to floating midair in that independent movie theater and quickly looked for a good target to possess, right? As we pretty much, like, his, like, thought process of, like, okay, wait a second, I'm up. Like, oh, I guess I must be dead then. I guess I'm, like, floating in the air like this, so who am I going to possess around here? As he pretty much, like, spots Hajime and just says, like, and I chose you, right? And Hajime is like, what is so funny about all of that to you? Like, why are you so obsessed with my arm? What do you want to do with it, right? As Tenmaku just very blatantly explains, like, hey, right before I died, I was collaborating with a certain director on a script. But, like, hey, I'm so bummed. The director and I debated for months until we finally ironed out the movie structure. And all that was left was to submit the draft and the final script, right? It's like, hey, but then I ended up dying. I just croaked in the moment, right? And he's like, I can't believe this happened. Like, this absolutely sucks, pretty much, right? And Hajime's just like, this guy's, like, talking so blazingly lightly for, like, just going through and dying. Like, that's absolutely insane, right? And it's like, it's so much of this heavy stuff, right? But Tenmaku then just says, like, hey, the final script for that movie is right up in here, in my brain. So what I want is to dictate the script, and while you transcribe it, pretty much. And he's like, hey, and after that, I need you to deliver it to the director. And then I'll be able to pass on from this world, and I will never bother you again. He's like, hey, so do we have a deal about all of this? And of course, Hajime, being the big skeptic he is just like, okay, I understand your ghostly plight, but however, you just think you can possess me and then boss me around like that? Like, I'm not going to do your bidding, and like, you're just completely wrong. And we even see a little bit of an image where he's just like, hey, anyway, I don't have time to run your errand things, so like, I refuse here in a moment. And we see a mother and a child sort of just like walking through the streets and seeing Hajime arguing with nothing in the air, as pretty much just like this mother and child is just like, hey child, he's just weird, don't be like him whenever you grow up, pretty much, right? A little bit of a funny thing there. But we see that, of course, being that Tenmaku is a ghost, he has a little bit of ability over, like, all of his attire and everything. Pretty much goes through, sends out his, like, scarf thing and pretty much wraps it around Hajime's neck and just says, like, hey, well, what if I threaten to strangle you then? I can do some things to your body, but I can't perform precise actions like writing words. And that's why I need your help. And he's like, hey, strangling somebody like you would be super easy, and like, hey, I did a bunch of experiments on you last night whenever you were sleeping, pretty much, right? And Hajime's like, you did what, and how do you know all this? Like, I don't like you, pretty much, right? But eventually he says, like, hey, I guess I have no choice but to hear this guy out. I can't afford to get strangled to death here in, like, my junior year of, my final year of junior high school, right? And he's like, hey, I have my exams I need to take, and once that happens, sure, I can help this guy out, pretty much, right? And he's like, fine, I'll write your script. Well, we then get back to, of course, Hajime's house, and we see that he's sort of sitting down at his desk. His notebook is out here, and he's pretty much like, well, this is weird, but on the other hand, I got to witness the work of a professional screenwriter, even if he is a ghost. Like, hey, as a movie fan, I guess that at least is a little exciting, you know what? And eventually Hajime's just like, oh, hey, by the way, whenever I write this out for you, Tenmaku, who am I going to be delivering this to? Like, do you know their address? And we pretty much see that Tenmaku's like, oh, I mean, of course. And I also think, like, hey, if you're a movie fan, then you've probably heard of him, like director Ryu Shirakawa. And Hajime's like, oh yeah, director Shirakawa. And he sort of like pauses and he's like, wait a second. That Ryu Shirakawa? As we pretty much look on his shelf as he goes over, pulls off like this big box set of all of these movies and just says like, hey, like this Shirakawa holds all the DVDs in front of him, or Blu-rays, whatever they are, right? And Tenmaku just is like, oh yeah, that's the one. You've like quite the correct collection, pretty much, right? As Hajime pretty much like just has the pen in his hand, just throws it behind him, just is like, you're funny, you're just completely lying about that, right? As we get a little bit of narration about who Ryo Shirakawa is. Ryu Shirakawa, the legendary director, Six Beast, Raingate, Whitebeard. He's globally renowned for numerous titles considered Japanese masterpieces. He's been cited as a Spielberg and Lucas as an inspiration. He has been cited by Spielberg and Lucas as an inspiration. In fact, he's the director I admire the most, right? As eventually Hajime's just like, hey, also come to think of it, how old are you, Tenmaku? And he's like, you look sort of young. And Tenmaku just says like, oh, I mean, how can I prove my age? And he just sort of like goes to the back of his cap and like pulls off this little bit of a class badge. He's like, hey, look at this, I'm a third year in high school, pretty much, meaning that he's like 17, or no, he even says he's 18, right? My bad, my numbers were a bit off, right? As Hajime is just freaking out, like, 18, no way a kid your age could write a script with the gravitas of a Shirakawa movie, like, how dare you disrespect cinema, right? As eventually Hajime's like, hey, now I'm really getting worked up over all of this, right? As pretty much Tenmaku's like, oh crap, I need all of this various proof, right? And Hajime just sort of thinks like, okay, I think I sort of understand this. He must be like an amateur screenwriter of some kind. He's just like a big fan. Like, I've also never heard of a Takahiko Tenmaku, so if he's never gotten his name out there, like, he must have just been like a big stalker guy who had just these massive delusions, right? And he also just is like, hey, and to think a legendary director whose name has gone down in history, as Hajime is just like, oh yeah, history. Oh, wait a second, right? As pretty much he goes over to Tenmaku. Tenmaku's like, hey, please believe me. But Hajime just says like, hey, well, whether or not you believe me or not, whether or not I believe you or not, what you're asking me is kind of impossible. As we then see that Tenmaku and Hajime go to a bookstore, and we see that in the bookstore, of course, is currently July of 2023, as we see there's a magazine out called The Age of Cinema, and we see this is a special edition, being that celebrating 20 years since Ryu Shirakawa's death. And Tenmaku is very, like, abruptly like, gosh, this is crazy. And also we see that in the bottom corner there's a little bit of a special edition with a actress named Hinaki Kurai, right? And an exclusive interview going on with her. Hey, that may be coming up later in this chapter, you know what I'm saying, right? But either way, Tenmaku's sort of like, oh, crap, this isn't good, right? It's like, oh, 20 years since Ryu Shirakawa's death? And I was like, wait a second, it's 2023? And he's like, okay, wait a second. Let me do the math. I started my third year of high school in 1993, so he's like, wait a second, I'm 30 years old. And he's like, okay, so I guess I died 30 years ago, and then director Shirakawa died 20 years ago, 10 years after me, and now we're 20 years later after all of this various stuff, right? As pretty much he's just like, ha, I get it now. In other words, 30 years have passed since I died. And we see that he's pretty much just like, hey, and here's what I think, like, after you died, Tenmaku, your spirit was adrift in that theater for 30 years, and just the other day, you finally regained consciousness as a ghost, right? And he's just like, hey, I know it's a little hard to understand, but you should really just, like, go through and get over all of this various stuff, right? As we pretty much go through and see that Tenmaku is not doing very well with all of this information. He's like, hey, Ryu Shirakawa is dead, nothing else matters. And I was like, hey, well, in that case, that's fine. Send me off to the next world, please. And Hajime's like, send you off to the next world? Like, how am I supposed to do that, right? We then cut to a few days later, of course, after we see that Tenmaku gives him no answer at all. As we pretty much just see that, like, hey, he's in the movie club area pretty much, and of course all of the various friends like Bito, Shino, and Akitsu are all just sort of like looking at Hajime as like he's just like got these very sunken cheeks and like he's not looking absolutely amazing at all. And we even see that Hajime is reading The Age of Cinema magazine, which is like, hey, it's pretty cool. Of course he's a movie fan, he'd pick it up and go through and read it pretty much, right? But Akitsu sort of says like, hey, is everything alright with you, Hajime? Like, is something bothering you? Like, is everything alright, pretty much, right? As Hajime just says like, hey, well, I sort of do have this problem. What does it take to satisfy a person who makes movies? And Shino's like, what are you talking about? Like, what's such a psychological question you have, or such a philosophical, what is that word? Why can I not say it? A psychological or philosophical, yes, philosophical, that's the word. What a philosophical question you have there, right? And Hajime's like, hey, it doesn't matter, I was just like sort of wondering, if you know what I'm saying, right? And Bito's like, hey, like, how could I possibly know, like, what goes into the mind of a genuine filmmaker, right? As Hajime just says like, hey, well, you're in the movie research club, so like, you should at least have a little bit of an idea, you know what I'm talking about, right? As, of course, the four of them are all, like, bantering back and forth about all of this, as all of a sudden, there's a little few voices coming from the window outside, and Hajime sort of, like, just looks out the window from the second floor building where they are right now, as you just see there's a mob of people all around a car, and a girl walking to that car, right? As we see outside, a bunch of these students are just like, hey, Kuraki-senpai, like, Himeki, look over here, please, like, I love you, like, you're so cool, and all of that various stuff, right? as we see that Bito's like, oh yeah, that's right, that's someone in the movie industry, right? And he's like, that's pretty cool that they even go to our school, right? You know what I'm talking about? And Chino's like, hey, Hajime, if you have a question about making movies, why not ask her? And we already see that, like, hey, Hajime is already on the run, right? As Hajime just thinks like, hey, that's right, there's a girl in our grade who's a celebrity actress. Hinaki Kurai, 3rd year, class 2, stage name, Himeki Kuraki, of course, who we got the whole interview in the Age of Cinema magazine for earlier, right? As we pretty much see, like, the running commentary from all of the movie-making club upstairs, or the movie research club, as Hajime runs outside, and everybody's like, oh, there he goes. Oh, no, he's been blocked by a mob of people. Oh, he's breaking through, and then he just gets thrown out, and they're like, oh, no, right? As Hajime just on the ground floor is just like, god damn it, right? As he just takes a good look at our female lead in this series, of course, Kurai, and of course he just gets a good look at her, and we just get this very beautiful shot of just like, hey, she's standing here looking back, and her face is drawn very nicely by, what is it, Yuta Sakuda, who does the writing and who does the art for the series? Oh yeah, Shun Sayeki does the art, and Yuta Sakuda does the writing for it, right? But if I can get back to where I was in the chapter, yeah, here we are, right? We see that Himeki pretty much goes and gets in the car, and not Tenmaku, Hajime makes it back up to the movie making club, and everybody's just like, hey, that's a really tough break, right? Like, you weren't able to talk to her, right? But pretty much Bito is just like flipping through the magazine that, of course, Hajime left upstairs, just as like, yeah, I mean, it says here in this magazine that Himeki started whenever she was in preschool, and like, yeah, she was in a bunch of movies as a child actor, and she just says like, hey, and then 2 years ago, she landed the role as a supporting actress in a major film, and it really made her big break, right? And like, hey, these days, she hardly ever comes to school, but when she does, it's usually just in the morning. Of course, she's busy. She's starring in a movie that comes out this summer, right? As we just see a bunch of these images from all of her roles in various movies, and like all of the guys just like, whoa, like I love those mysterious eyes, like they're almost like bottomless wells almost, right? And Chino just is like, yeah, and at school she's so quiet, but on screen she simply sparkles, right? And Hajime is just like, okay, you guys, like, whatever. But if you are so enthusiastic about movies in general, like, I don't really understand, right? And Akitsu just is like, hey, well, it's understandable. They're dazzled by a celebrity at our own school, right? And Akitsu just says like, hey, and you've seen a number of Karaki's movies, right, Hajime? And Hajime's like, what are you talking about? I've seen all of them, right? As pretty much he just goes through and starts to talk all the way about him, giving them all of the points and all of that various stuff, right? But Aki's like, hey, I get it. Kuraki is absolutely awesome. Like, we don't need to go over any of this anymore, right? Or I think I said that wrong. It's Kurakui, right? But either way, he's just like, hey, so now what? Like, are you going to rush at Kuraki again next time she comes to school, right? And Hajime's like, I mean, it's not like somebody I can just easily go up and talk to, you know what I'm saying, right? As he's like, hey, as a movie fan, it's my role to watch her from a distance, right? But of course, he's more thinking inside of his brain like, hey, besides, I don't think that talking to her would really solve any of my various problems, right? As he just imagines sort of walking up to her and being like, hey, what do you think would be the best way to get rid of a ghost that likes watching movies to pass on to the next world? And Hajime's like, yeah, I definitely can't ask her any of that, right? But Hajime pretty much heads upstairs whenever he gets back home at this point. Of course, like I mentioned, he is heading home now, right? But he sort of walks upstairs, says like, hey, I'm home, and walks into his room, and he's like, hey, have you made any progress? As we see that Tenmaku is pretty much sitting on a dispel bad spirits talisman circle thing, and he's just sitting on it, and he's like, it's not working. He's like, hey, for the last few days, we've tried, Sultras, purifying salts, and every exorcism technique we could think of, but there's zero sign of me passing on at all, right? And he's just like, hey, I guess sutras only really work on bad spirits, right? And Hajime's like, I mean, I think you're a bad spirit, but I don't really know about all of that, right? But Hajime's like, hey, I need to study. Could you, like, move out of the way of the middle of my room, like, where you have this demonic summoning dispel circle thing, right? And Tenmaku's like, oh, my bad, how thoughtless of me, right? As he's pretty much just, like, sitting in the background, just going like, gosh, how I envy you being able to be, like, alive, having a purpose. Like, there's nothing you can do whenever you're dead, right? And Hajime's getting a little peeved off about all of this. He's like, damn it, is there any other way of passing it on to the next world? And he's eventually like, hey, wait a second. I think I've got something. how about, like, watching some movies? Like, maybe if you rewatch your favorites from back in the day, you'll be able to feel sort of fulfilled and be able to rest in peace, right? As we pretty much see that Tenmaku's like, good idea, let's go to the theater. And Hajime is like, no, I'm studying right now. But he's like, hey, I think I have something that will work just fine, pretty much, right? As we see that Hajime sort of pulls out an iPad and just is like, hey, like, look at this right here. He's like, hey, watch movies on my tablet. Like, sorry if it's a few generations old. And Tenmaku's like, this is a weird thing. Like, what is this? Like, you want me to watch movies on that? Like, the screen is just, like, so small. Like, a big screen makes a big movie, as he sort of says, right? And he's like, hey, how tragic I mourn the future of the movie world. But Hajime pretty much sets it up, and we see that Tenmaku almost gets instantly enthralled into it, right? As he's like, okay, the quality is good. Like, maybe this tablet thing isn't so bad whatsoever. And, like, hey, streaming this on this device is, like, so pretty cool. Like, this is honestly a cool deal, right? As he's just like, hey, he seems pretty happy back there, right? Well, we cut to about, I don't know, like maybe 2 hours, 2.5 hours, an hour and a half into the future, as we see that this movie has finished, and Tenmaku's like, hey, it's over, I want to see a new Cinema Paradise next, like, can you please, like, turn it on really quick, right? And Hajime's like, oh, damn it, like, I sort of understand how parents feel now raising, like, a young child who only wants to, like, watch YouTube and all of that other stuff, right? And like, hey, if you're a young child watching this video right now, you probably should be watching something better. You know, actually watch my videos. I think they will do some good to bring you in society, right? But if you're not a child watching this, still thank you for watching this. But yeah, I sort of feel Hajime here, if you know what I'm saying, right? But Hajime pretty much just says, like, okay, I've got you a movie on, I'm going to go eat dinner, right? As we see that he sort of goes and walks downstairs, like, hey, I'll be back around the end of the movie, right? Tenmaku's like, all right, cool, thank you, and pretty much, like, leaves him be. And he also, it's just extremely funny, because the next scene we see is Hajime eating his food downstairs, and Tenmaku sort of, like, comes through the ceiling. Hey, can you turn the movie up a little bit? And Hajime almost, like, spits out his food onto, like, either his mom or his sister, like, sitting in front of him, pretty much, right? And also, Tenmaku comes in to see him while he's sitting in the bath studying, like, these little, like, vocabulary flashcard things he's got in his hands, right? And it's pretty much just like, hey, I want to see that last scene again, can you please rewind it? And Hajime's like, damn it, like, what are you doing, right? As we even see that Hajime is trying to go to sleep, and Tenmaku even wakes him up just saying, like, hey, it's over, can you play the next movie, right? As Hajime just says, like, hey, have you, like, forgotten the point of all of this? Like, you just seem to be enjoying yourself now, right? And he's like, you seriously need to really be thinking about how to sort of pass on to the next life. And he also says, like, hey, and come to think of it, the movie we were making with director Shirakawa, like, in your imagination at least, like, what was this movie about? And he's like, hey, maybe there's a hint to make you pass on and all the things there, right? And Tenmaku's like, hey, it's just a secret. And I love how Hajime, like, just grabs a piece of paper and just, like, throws it directly at him. And, it, like, Tenmaku's able to dodge out of the way of it, but I also just imagine the paper just, like, completely goes straight through him, pretty much, right? But pretty much Tenmaku just says, like, hey, well, I guess I can tell you the title at least. It was a movie called The Fang, right? And Hajime is like, hey, how about this? Maybe we'll find another good director and send it to them, right? And he's like, hey, and if we do that, you'll pass on to the next world, and you won't be my problem anymore, right? But pretty much Tenmaku just is like, hey, there's nobody in this world who can replace Mr. Shirakawa. I told myself that I could die if he were willing to make the Fang. And Hajime's just like, hey, you shouldn't say stuff like that. Like, actually, there's no wonder that you actually just went croaked and pretty much died like that, right? But Tenmaku just says, like, hey, either way, that's how special this story is. As he just says, like, hey, wait, well, maybe, like, Spielberg could make it, or, like, Lucasfilms, or any of those people, right? Like, hey, maybe I will just send it to Lucasfilms, you know? As Hajime just talks, like, hey, talk about a really brazen guy right there, right? But he says, like, hey, he's a nobody as far as I'm concerned, but his passion for movies is truly real. Even setting aside the passing on to the next world thing, I hope the right person appears to make Tenmaku's wish come true. As we just see a really, really nice visual of him and Hajime, of Tenmaku and Hajime, just sort of sitting next to each other, sort of showing, like, hey, maybe Hajime will be that guy. But I'd be remiss if I, like, did talk about the funniest joke in this chapter, where Hajime's like, oh yeah, by the way, Disney bought Lucasfilm, and we just see Tenmaku's like, what are you talking about? Of course, I'm pretty sure that was, like, bigger news back there in the day. I mean, when did Disney buy Lucasfilm? I'm gonna actually look that up. When did Disney buy Lucasfilm? When was that? Yeah, October 2012, so it's honestly a little funny that, like, even 10 years later, Hajime's just like, hey, did you know this happened? Gosh, that was actually, like, 13 years ago at the recording of this video. That's absolutely insane, but, gosh, that happened when I was, like, 7. Wow, that's absolutely crazy now the more I think about it, right? But, okay, either way, going into the manga chapter, right? We see that Hajime is heading to school the next day, right? And, pretty much Tenmaku's just in like, hey, please, I'm begging you, please, I want to stream more movies, right? And Hajime is like, hey, quit being so selfish, like, I have school, you need to accept it, right? As Tenmaku's like, hey, just ditch it, like, press play on the movies for me, pretty much, because I can't interact with the screen. And Hajime's like, hey, don't mess up with all my grades, like, I am not going to do that for you, right? And he's like, hey, either way, like, why are you following me to school, right? As Tenmaku's just like, hey, I have to make sure that you come to home directly after school, pretty much. Like, hey, after school, we're going straight home to watch movies. He got that, pretty much. And Hajime's just like, gosh, this guy better pass on to the next world, and he better do it quick, right? But as he's sort of on his way to school, he pretty much gets ready to, like, where the gates are, pretty much, and he sees there's a bunch of commotion going on. And hey, it looks like it's because Kurai has come to school again today. And pretty much there's a bunch of people just asking, like, oh, hey, Himeki, you're here, you're cool as always, and like, hey, you're beautiful. I promise to go see your next movie, like, are you doing more filming today? And she's like, yes, good morning to you all, we start filming in the afternoon today, right? And we sort of see that Hajime gets a good look at this, and is like, oh, hey, look at that, it's Kurai. And, like, she's always so popular, and she's always surrounded by admirers, right? Well, Tenmaku gets a good look at Kurai here in a moment. And we see, like, at first he's just like, oh, who is that? But then it sort of just hits him, as he just looks at Kurai, her walking into the school, as he just gets this sort of look on his face, as he just, like, understands everything about what he wants to do. And he gets a vision for a movie here in this moment. As we just see all of these various scenes of dialogue get played out, especially ending with one that just says, like, hey, I'm home, as pretty much we just see that Tenmaku's paying so much attention to this as Kurai is walking by. And pretty much Hajime looks over and is like, oh, Tenmaku, is everything okay? As we pretty much see that Tenmaku goes through, his eyes almost start glowing. He just goes, grabs Hajime by the arm and drags him into the school and pretty much pulls him by pretty much all of his other friends in the moment too, right? As he pretty much goes over, pretty much makes Hajime unconscious, pulls him into, like, the Muvio AV room, pretty much, and just grabs his hand, gets a pen in it, gets a bunch of paper out, and just starts scrawling the script for a movie. As he's like, oh my gosh, incredible, so incredible, like, my creative juices are just overflowing here. As he just says, like, hey, did that give me a temporary surge in spirit power? Like, I have to control all of Hajime's arm and his body, right? As pretty much we just see that he's going through and writing the movie here in the moment, right? Oh, I actually messed this up. We see that Hajime actually went home, and that's where Tenmaku drove him back to there in the moment, right? But we then see that Hajime's mom sort of, like, comes in and enters the room, and she's like, oh, hey, Hajime, why aren't you at school? Did you forget something, right? As she sort of just looks at her son, pretty much just, like, going through unconsciously writing this note, as Tenmaku's pretty much, like, using his arm here in the moment, right? As we get a little bit of narration, it just says, like, hey, through a glimmer of consciousness, Hajime realized that he was in the world of screenwriting, right? And that he was in the act of writing a script with a specific actor in mind, pretty much, right? As we just see, like, hey, Tenmaku's writing a script. He's using this method called ategaki, which is that whole idea of, like, writing a movie with an actor in mind, pretty much, right? But we pretty much see that, hey, later in the day, Hajime makes it back to the school. And he pretty much walks up to Kurai, and she's just like, oh, Shinichi, like, what are you doing around here? As we obviously see that, like, the two of them may have had a rapport in the past, right? And she's like, oh my gosh, you're hurt all over, like, is everything okay? Like, what happened to you? As Hajime just holds out a script in his hand, gives it over, and pretty much we see that Tenmaku like opens up his mouth and forces him to say some words, just like, I wrote this for you. I want you to star in this movie. Please play this role. Hajime Shinichi will film you. And we just see like this totally affects Kurai here in a moment as Hajime just passes out onto the ground. And honestly, I'm sorry if that voice was not creepy enough for what this manga was trying to explain here, but my voice is definitely ruined right now, and if I do any more of that voice, I'm going to start coughing and my throat's going to become sore and all of that stuff. So that is the best creepy ghost voice that you are getting here in the moment, right? But we see that Hajime pretty much passes out, and we see that later in the day, he wakes up in the pretty much school, like, nursery ward, pretty much, right? Or in the nurse's office, right? As we see that he pretty much wakes up and is like, oh, I'm in the nurse's office, like, oh, I guess I did collapse, and the teacher carried me here before all that. He's like, hey, Tenmaku, like, what did you do to me? He's like, I just remembered everything, right? And he's like, hey, he was, like, cackling like a maniac. Like, maybe he's satisfied enough now that he's already passed on to the other world. I'd be really happy if that was the case, right? But, of course, we see that Tenmaku is, like, floating right above Hajime. It's like, damn it, he's right there still, right? It's like, hey, you're sleeping now. Like, you have to go back and take back whatever you said to Kurai earlier, right? As Hajime thinks, like, hey, Kurai is a famous actress, and, of course, she wouldn't take a movie script like that so easily, right? As he then, in the moment, hears the door to, of course, the nurse's office roll open as he looks behind him, and it's like, oh, Kurai, you're here, right? And he's like, oh gosh, I'm so sorry about all of that, right? And he's like, hey, Shinichi, what is this? As she holds up the movie script, and Hajime's just like, oh crap, like, I'm so sorry, I shouldn't have forced that on you, like, please forget about everything I said back there. But Hameki's like, no, I accept. And Hajime is like, like, what, you accept? As Kurai just is like, hey, I'd be delighted to play the lead role. That's what I came to say. And he's like, hey, sorry, but I've got to go now. My driver is waiting downstairs, right? And she's like, hey, so, I'll see you tomorrow, director. As she sort of walks out of the nurse's ward, the script in her hand, pretty much. And Hajime is sitting here as pretty much the narration just goes, at the end of my last year of junior high, it was a summer day that I'll never forget. I, Hajime Shinichi, became a movie director. As we just see that he's like, huh? And of course, Tenmaku is asleep, floating in the air above him, as Hajime is sitting up in bed, definitely freaked out by the outcome of the events that have just pretty much unfolded here in a moment. And yeah, I honestly forgot how much of a good first chapter this was. It's honestly a little weird, because looking back at my Weekly Shonen Jump spreadsheet that I normally make, normally, like, I do Weekly Shonen Jump videos, so, like, I rank all the chapters. Go check out one of those if you want to know more in depth on, like, this whole process, but pretty much I go through and I rank all of the chapters every week that I read in the Weekly Shonen Jump magazine, from, like, what I thought was the best chapter of the week, going down to all of the worst chapter of the week, and sort of just going through and looking at it. Of course, on the week that this came out, I was only actually talking about 11 series that day, just sort of run down, like, what was going on. Then it was the Blue Box, Undead Unluck, Fabricant 100, Akane Banashi, One Piece, The Ichinose's Family, Deadly Sins, Witch Watch, Mashle Magic and Muscles, The Elusive Samurai, Ginka and Gluna, and Tenmaku Cinema. And that was actually the ranking that I put him in that week, which is very interesting for the fact that I put Tenmaku Cinema on the bottom, which is absolutely insane for the fact of, like, I thought this chapter was apparently the worst of the worst this week. If we looked at chapter 2, it actually ranked perfectly in the middle of the pack, and then chapter number 3 and chapter number 4 both ranked at the top spot. So, like, definitely I came over to the series in the matter of one singular week, but still it's honestly a little bit of a weird thing to be like, oh wow, I actually hated this chapter whenever it first came out. A little bit of just an interesting thing there, but this is honestly just a really good chapter of manga and a great introductory chapter to the series. Of course, I feel like this chapter had a lot of potential. I mean, how long did I even ramble about that chapter? Let me just go to my phone. Oh gosh, this has been a 45-minute video so far. Oh my, this is... What are you doing, Corbin? Golly, right? But it's just a really good introduction chapter. Of course, we know how this series went at the end of the day, but like I mentioned earlier, I figured just like, hey, why not just sit down here, go through it, and just make sure I have the complete series talked about on this channel, which I think is just a pretty cool thing to do. But yeah, with all of that out of the way, just thank you guys so much for watching this video on Tenmaku Cinema, chapter number 1. Of course, this chapter was titled, oh gosh, what was this chapter title again? Let me scroll all the way back to the beginning of the chapter. What's it called? The first movie, maybe? Oh gosh, come on, Viz. Now Viz doesn't want to load properly. Come on, will you? Okay, I'm gonna have to reload the entire page. It's gonna put me at the end of the chapter. Then I gotta scroll back 60 pages little by little. Come on, you want to tell me out? There we go. Yes, scene 1, the first movie. Pretty neat there, right? But hey, if you guys enjoyed this video, thank you guys so very much for watching it. I do plenty of other anime and manga related content here on the YouTube channel. So like, hey, if you liked how I did this video, I currently talk about manga like Kagurabachi. I used to talk about Navigatori no Shinoko. What else do I talk about right now? Yes, I talk about manga. I talk about a bunch of stuff on Weekly Show Jump. Kagurabachi, Marching Crown, World Trigger, and also Timed Knot of an Amagami Sister. So I cover all this manga currently. Of course, I've also had archive series, like I've covered Oshinoko in the past. I've covered a few other manga and anime series, but like, just go check out the YouTube channel if you're at all interested. And hey, I'll see you guys pretty soon for the Tenmaku Cinema chapter number 2 review. And like, hey, at that point, the Tenmaku Cinema chapter reviews will be over. Actually, maybe not, because didn't they do a chapter of Tenmaku Cinema that was pretty much going through and like a wrap up at the very end of the 3rd volume? Let me see if that's in like Manga Plus or something, if somebody updated there. And in that case, we may have 3 Tenmaku Cinema videos pretty much coming up here soon. Let me actually, Tenmaku Cinema, the completed manga. Yes, I know very much. No, it doesn't look like the extra edition got translated in English, which sort of is what it is there, but I guess maybe I could try buying the volume edition on Viz, but it's a digital volume, and I honestly would rather not pay that for what's like $7 or something like that. I don't know if I'm particularly into that here at this moment, but like, hey, who knows, right? But hey, either way, thank you guys so very much for watching this video on Tenmaku Cinema, and yeah, I'll catch you guys next time. This will be Glowplasma 231 signing out. Hey, I made this video under 50 minutes. That's a good thing. You look at all the Tenmaku Cinema reviews, none of them got over like 20 minutes, I believe. I'll see you guys next time. Glowplasma.